Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. Once again, the Supreme Court has protected the fairness called for by our Constitution. In its wave of decisions Friday, the court upheld the First Amendment rights of a Colorado graphic designer who refused to create a same-sex wedding site due to her faith. In the majority opinion, Justice Neil Gorsuch rebuked Sonia Sotomayor's dissent, saying that it, quote, reimagines the facts and fails to answer the fundamental question of the case itself. But American values are under assault in Michigan. You won't believe this. Members of the State House passed a bill that could actually make using the wrong pronouns a felony in the Great Lakes state. It's now clear that civil rights have become a zero-sum game for the left, where the goal is no longer for Americans to be treated the same. Instead, they want regular Americans to bow down to every wish of the liberal mob. Just look at how they reacted to yesterday's affirmative action decision.
He has been assisted, by white patrons, really his whole life. He seems to deeply resent all of the assistance he got, and he wants to make sure that nobody like him ever gets that kind of help again, because it helps his self-image so that he can lie to himself and fool himself and maybe hate himself a little less for having gotten help all along his path to the Supreme Court.
It's done more to unravel basic rights and basic decisions than any court in recent history.
Our country is at great risk of returning to those old days when Black and Latinx and Native folks, the people who built this country, are shut out.
The Supreme Court of the United States is stomping on the dreams of our young people.
This is a very serious change, and from my point of view, a tragedy.
Is this leading to no women in colleges soon? Who knows?
Wow, they are invested in victimhood, aren't they? It's awful. And while the left continues its meltdown, a new disturbing poll conducted by Gallup shows pride in America continues to hover around historic lows, with only 39% of respondents saying they feel extremely proud to be Americans. Here with reaction, author of The Puppeteers, The People Who Control America, Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz, a bestseller, by the way. Congratulations on that, sir. And author of the upcoming book out on the 4th of July, Put You All Back in Chains, How Joe Biden's Policies Hurt Blacks, Horace Cooper, who is also the co-chair of Project 21, and New York Post columnist Carol Markowitz. Thank you all for joining me tonight. Let's start with you, Jason. You hear this rhetoric when we talk about who's controlling things and just the awful, demeaning rhetoric. It's almost like people want there to be this chaos. They want there to be these divisions. Is that too harsh, or do you think that's what's really going on?
No, I think that's an accurate representation. In fact, I would go even further and say I think they prey on the idea that they want systemic racism. I listen to those comments in the montage, and I look at it and think that's so racist. It's so demeaning to suggest that women or somebody of any sort of ethnicity wouldn't be able to accomplish what some white person would be able to accomplish. I mean, where did they come up with these? I wasn't raised like that. I never heard those things. I shudder to think what my parents would say if I uttered something even close to that. And yet, this is what they live on. They prey on, and they just demoralize. They want special class, special privileges. Why not just fight for equality? How about fighting for equality and getting rid of the racism that they so heavily invest in?
Well, because they're so heavily invested in it, right? This is it. Mr. Cooper, I mean, this is the dynamic where there's, and I was the president of Los Angeles Now for a number of years, and was told directly by a leading, a founding feminist of that organization, when I complained that we were making certain things worse, that every now and then we needed to rub salt into the wound. Because if we were too successful, we wouldn't be here when we would be needed again later. What has been your experience when it comes to these kinds of decisions and what the left is complaining about now?
Well, it reminds me that history is repeating itself. Let me say, first of all, Miss Reed ought to go and spend a little bit more time figuring out how her personal social media sites were hacked and they were allowed to be portraying some of the most hateful rhetoric, in which she then said she didn't know how she managed to do. But so put her aside, and she should not be commenting on anyone's background. But here's what the history lesson here is. In 1954, when the Supreme Court stood up for freedom and justice the same way the Supreme Court did this month, a resistance developed. There were schools, there were institutions that said they were not going to follow. They were not going to adhere. Guess what? Every single one of those representatives, if they were elected leaders, they were Democrats. Right. This is true today. Unlike President Eisenhower, who escorted the Arkansas Nine to make sure their rights were protected, our president today, he stood up and said he was going to work to figure out how to contravene the decision. Hallelujah, that if you are an American, the government isn't going to force you to violate your personal beliefs in order for you to enter the workplace. Hallelujah, government should never be telling people they have to have their race assessed before we can decide what benefits or detriments that we're going to have. We don't need Plessy, Ferguson. We need this Supreme Court. Shame on those Democrats.
Yeah, it's remarkable, Carol. It's not surprising with everything that we've been seeing that this poll, and there's been a few polls about the decline of Americans feeling patriotic. But when you watch what's going on and how the system that we love is being manipulated and warped, isn't that perhaps part of the direction of why that patriotism has declined, because of what our government has been doing and what the left has been doing?
Absolutely, but also their reaction to something like today's decisions, you know, the just clawing and tearing at their shirts and being so dramatic about how this is the end of civilization as we know it because a few decisions didn't go their way. I think that really affects people. And look, for me, I'm an immigrant to this country. I celebrate the day we came to America every year. It's coming up July 20th, my Americaversary. And I know that this is the greatest, freest country that's ever been. And even the problems that we face, even the difficult times, even the Joe Biden administration, I think we can get past it and really learn to celebrate that we live in this amazing place. We're so lucky. We're so lucky to be born here. We're so lucky to get to live here. And that should be the lesson to our children. That's what we should give our kids to take away, that you are blessed. You are lucky to be an American, and you should think that every single day.
That's a great point. Jason, a lot of people are looking at the free speech decision as being anti-gay or something, or and then other decisions being about racism. But there's the same thread in all of them, which is the basic constitutional norms, the things that all Americans embrace, which is about, you know, and even our American civil rights movements, about not being punished for being different, for being able to express yourself differently. And that's what we fought for, and now we seem to be turning that around, and we've become the thing that we said was so bad in the beginning by trying to shut down people.
Yeah, I haven't been able to get past these Democrats and these people on the far left who have preached for their whole lives about diversity, and then you have a diversity of thought, and heaven forbid, you should be shunned, you should be shut down, you should be in prison. The idea that if you use a pronoun improperly on purpose in the state of Michigan, that you're going to get a $10,000 fine? I mean, who in the world thinks that that is the American way, that's consistent with the First Amendment? Shame on Michigan. They are better than that. I can't believe that they continue to support that regime there in Michigan.
Well, and that's what they have in Europe. It's about the offended being able to determine if someone has committed a crime based on their feelings. That is not a rule of law. That's a madness of law. All right, everyone, thank you so much for being with me tonight.